be seated.
Mr. McKim?
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Savage should be here shortly, I think, but I'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here today. The solicitor has offered you as an expert in forensic scene analysis and recreation, amongst other things. Could you tell me what you would describe as forensic scene analysis and recreation?
Well, whether it's during the initial event, which usually doesn't involve me, and that is a crime's committed, or it does involve me in an accident, I may be the first to the scene as far as investing, so it can go both ways. You'd analyze all evidence at the scene, you'd document it, and if it was a previous event that other people had done work, of course, you would incorporate that into your analysis. You'd look at all available evidence that deals with that, whether it's physical evidence at the scene, whether there's video, audio, paper, and you would see how many of those pieces can be tied back together to try and create as comprehensive a picture of what took place as possible.
So what would be the product then from, an example of a product from a forensic scene analysis?
It could go any number of ways. It depends on what visual media, if any, is available. Let's say there's none in the area of, let's say, an accident. It could be a recreation of the vehicle's motions, or in that dram shop case that were mentioned. We've created, they're not quite Hollywood quality, but we would drive the route from the bar or whatever establishment to the location of the accident, and we would film that, and then we would put a 3D model into that and apply speeds and such to that vehicle, usually from downloading the computer, and the vehicle tells you how fast it was going. So we would give us a simulation of what took place that night, and that would be one piece. The other piece would be if there were videos inside the establishment, we would analyze those, we would enhance those, and we would sync those and tell the inside story. And we may work with other experts, like in that case, we'd work with the person talking about how many drinks the person had and how it would affect their blood alcohol. So we would chart over time what was happening to the blood alcohol and tie that into the master timeline. If it's something like this, the same thing, and that is where there's a visual component, you tie that in. Where not, you give whatever visual you can if there is one, and if there's documentation tied in, such as a taser report, you try and bring all the pieces together to tell as comprehensive a story as possible with what's available.
And when you have done these forensic scene analyses, have those been used in things such as mediation?
Yes.
Have you introduced what you call a sort of a total package of forensic scene analysis into court before?
A total, I guess I'd have to ask for your description of total scene analysis.
Let's just say videos that you had enhanced, coupled with a timeline, coupled with some sort of animation. Have you ever introduced one of those into court?
Well, in the Summers case, I didn't testify in that case. I testified in front of the judge in the case and was asked about my methodology before it was allowed to be used or presented in front of the jury. So that case had all these elements that I did, but I wasn't asked to authenticate or to provide testimony about them. They are accepted by both parties.
So then you have not had one of these qualified under an expert standard in court yet?
Well, the work in Combs, it wasn't as involved as this one, but that involved my work on the dash cam video of the traffic stop that started the whole incident. So I enhanced both audio and video in that, and then I did the scene work in that, I did the witness line of sight work in that, and I testified about my work in that case.
And in Combs, was that the case that was in January of 2015 when you were called to testify in that case up in Orangeburg?
I testified in both of the trials.
Okay. And did you introduce any video enhancements in either of those trials?
Well, again, the video enhancements, they were taken by both sides as being accurate, so I wasn't asked to explain what I did to them or challenged on them.
Okay. And in fact, in the trial in January stabilize the video.
Other than attempting to get it through the company, that's as far as I could take it. My own work, and I'll say this for both Synthesize and Ikena, is to, Ikena has a nice feature. You bring a video into it, they say off the shelf, hit a button. They have like 5 presets, but talking to the tech guy who put together all of their tutorials, he said they're outdated. So there's not too many one push button functions that, hey, well, there it is. So they have a number of options for you to select from that you work with and come up with your own preset. And you can slide a bar across the screen that shows you the original versus the change to see what kind of changes are taking place. You can assign a percentage of stabilization and a number of different features. So I've worked with every video I've done in this case, which there's only a couple we're going to, I guess, talk about that may come to light, but I've got a lot of Ikena work, and I've said, okay, did it change this? Did it change that in terms of, let's say, what's in the hand? Or I'm looking at this. And it hasn't. In terms of the Synthesize, we actually reverse engineered one of Synthesize outputs for us by taking each frame. If you can imagine, I got a stabilized video doing this. Well, take each frame and figuring out the offset of them, bringing the actual frames from the original video into a photo editor like Photoshop, calculating or extracting the offset, then taking those frames and applying that offset into just a general video editing program that there's no image change at all, and the outcome was the same. So we've done our own checks and balances to see that we're not changing the core image.
But you would agree with me, if you're looking with your eyes and you find an image that's more pleasing to the eye, that doesn't mean the image is forensically correct. Isn't that true?
I think that in the objects that I was looking at, how I was deciphering it, I would say that the appealing to the eye, the clearness, the sharpness, the lack of blur, that's what you're trying to get to when you do it, as long as you're not changing the image in terms of the core image. You're not adding artifacts, you're not adding something to the image.
You actually in Ikena are adding, right? Aren't you? Doesn't Ikena work through a process of interpolation? So it takes frames and blends them together and makes things that weren't there before?
Only if you apply the super resolution preset or filter to it.
Well, if you cannot, with your naked eye, see an edge or a line, and then you can make it clearer by using this software program, would it be important to you to know that you haven't added anything or taken anything away?
See, one of their big sales pitches was this super resolution where it would look before and after the frame you're looking at and composite a frame based on that. Well, after getting the software and looking at that feature, it doesn't apply to this video because we have camera motion and we have object motion, and it's really for a more stationary type of event, like clarifying a license plate in a car or a slow-moving boat on the ocean, that type of thing. This, it wouldn't work at all.
But you
So,
did, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no,
But you did say that you're not exactly sure what changes are made in there, what scientific principle-based changes are made to those images in the computer program when they come out?
I'm not sure too many people are unless they're able to get into the code of the actual program, which I don't think's accessible, at least not to me.
Is there a way of manually stabilizing a video?
Sure.
And you could do that in lieu of using a program like Ikena, correct?
We did that with our Synthesize output. We cheated, if you want to call it that. We said, okay, Synthesize, we bring our video in, and it's a very poor video for an automatic solve, which is a one push button. So you assign trackers, and the trackers are on fixed points that will change position during the different frames, and then you solve. And you adjust the trackers until your solve rate is low enough that you get a good result. Then you produce the video, okay? Now, we took that as our map to change each frame's position. I want an offset to the X, to the Y, and we assign those to version frames out of the video. We said, okay, the first frame in Synthesize was off by 300 pixels and up by 400 pixels, sign that. The second frame was off by 1200, 300, we signed that. And we went through the whole thing for that video, and we put them side by side, and the results were the same. So that was our reverse engineering of Synthesize with our work, and it satisfied us. We were very pleased to see that there were no changes to what we were looking at.
So essentially you peer reviewed your own work, is that correct?
We peer reviewed Synthesize software, yeah.
But your peer review was not reviewed, is that correct?
No, it was not reviewed.
So the differences between the videos, once again, between the cell phone video and the L3 video, what other differences exist in those sorts of technologies that are captured? What's the
Excuse me.
what's the resolution of the cell phone?
1920 by 1080.
And how about the L3 video?
Well, it was, since I did a screen capture, it was controlled by the player size on my screen, so I think it was in the 600s.
So the screen capture being controlled by the player size on your screen means that the L3 videos aren't true to their native format.
In the past of programs that allowed you to export that type of video, dash cam video, they're fairly low resolution, 640, 480, some even smaller than that, but they're not generally, at least on the systems I've dealt with, turned out as high-res videos.
And do you know what codec is?
Kodak?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what's that?
Well, it's what allows a video to play on a certain operating system. You have to have the right codec installed in the operating system to allow that to be seen.
And what does a codec mean? What does it say to you? What is it short for? Do you understand what?
I can't quote it to you.
Okay, it's compressor and decompressor, right?
Okay, yes.
And so it's very important that if the video is compressed in some way, if it's going to be processed, that it's decompressed in a compatible manner. Is that correct?
Yeah, you don't want to lose anything in the process.
Do you understand what a metadata is regarding the videos?
Yes, you can take a look at more than just file name and last saved and that type of information.
And do you examine the metadata in your videos as part of your enhancement and/or stabilization?
I look at it, yes.
And what information are you looking at in the metadata to help you make sure that the jury gets the most accurate representation of the video that you can provide?
I don't use it for that. I haven't used it for that.
So you don't care about the refresh rates in the video?
I don't compare those. I haven't compared those.
And are you familiar with what a group of pictures is? The GOP group of pictures?
No.
So, we have, I think we've had testimony, it's around 30, it's 29.777 frames per second for most of these.
Yes.
Correct? And there's a group of pictures that starts with a reference frame and then has followed by a number of projected frames. Isn't that correct?
I don't know.
and you can plot the predictive frames and get a good idea of what the stability or the non-stability of the video camera was at the time to help you enhance and to help you know whether it's enhanceable or not. Isn't that correct?
I don't know.
Now, you also do audio enhancement?
When asked, yes, sir.
And what kind of program do you use to do audio enhancement?
A program called AVS, Audio Editor, Audacity, and I forget the third one's name.
And how do you enhance audio? What do you do?
Well, I listen to what it sounds like and what the characteristics are and what may be the issues to try and clarify it. Usually, most audios are applicable to a noise filter. So you take a small sample of sound that's outside of voices or whatever the core sound is, and you sample that and you apply that to either all or part of the rest of the file. There could be a hum or a hiss. Sometimes it's an amplify. It depends on what the source audio is.
And how do you determine when you have clarified it or enhanced it properly? Is it by ear, by sight, by mathematical formula? What do you do?
Primarily by ear.
So if it sounds good, it sounds better, it probably is better, correct?
If I haven't changed the core content of what's being said, then, and it makes that sound or whatever's being said clearer, yes.
So in a case like this, you've heard that split seconds make all the difference in this matter because of the short time frame in which a series of critical events took place, correct?
It is a short event, yes.
And so you would agree with me that if one were to present videos with half of the frames missing because they weren't de-interlaced, or you were to present a video with the images that were synthesized or put together rather than taken frame by frame, that it might have the chance of misleading the jury, and it doesn't have a scientific basis.
Well, on the patrol car video, the things at issue there are whether or not there are objects in Mr. Scott's hands on his first time out of the car and then on his second. And I've spent way too much time on this whole project. I know that all of my work, whether it was through Ikena, through Synthesize, through Vegas, doing it by hand, frame by frame, position it myself, that none of the processes I've applied to that video, whether it's missing half the frames or not, changed the fact that there are two objects in his hand when he gets out of the car the first time and one object in his hand the second time. All they've done is made it clearer. I've said from the start that I could show what all these produced with the original video with the right player. But they've not changed the content to that aspect. And that's another check and balance, is that I didn't just rely on Ikena. I didn't just rely on Synthesize. I applied as many different techniques as I could to see what the differences were and showed them all.
What are some of those other methods you applied to?
I think okay, so we have Ikena. Now that's just not just the program, that's applying different sets of filters to see what the outcome is. And again, sliding that bar over, it's a really neat feature where you slide the bar over, there's the original, now there's a change back and forth. Trying that with multiple different presets. Synthesize, same thing. All knowing that I've re-engineered some of our work and know I have confidence in Synthesize is not adding to that video. And then doing it by hand, and that is basically outputting the frames from the original video, bring it into an editor, and change it, moving around, and stabilizing it that fashion. And then I used an app on the iPad. They have a couple apps for stabilization. So I've looked at a number of different ways, and the core content it doesn't change. The detail changes a little, but he doesn't now have, I can't see his credit card out of the one, something like that. The objects are still there in all of them.
Well, I think the bigger question is it forensically correct? Is the product that you got out of that the same as that went in there? And how can you verify that, that you didn't have your images either dropped or your images weren't interpolated in a way that are creating things that aren't there or leaving things out that are there?
Well, I can't answer that because I can't get to that level of knowledge. They basically wouldn't provide that. Synthesize, I'll stand on what I said. Anybody can reverse engineer any of my stabilized work in thin size, and they should come up with the same result I did. So if they want to peer review it, it's duplicatable.
But it hasn't been peer reviewed up to this point.
No.
And you're going to try to offer that into evidence in a murder case.
Well, the other thing that we were provided a limited number of files from the defense. And in that, one of those files was the taser movement. And I would challenge anybody to put their work next to ours and say who did which. It's visually, to anybody that I've shown it to, it's the same. Okay, what it does is it adds, since it's such a jerky camera at that time, and there's another thing going on, it's called rolling shutter. It's taking place with that camera. It's got a lot of bad reviews on it. I would say again, side by side, I don't know. I can't see a difference. Neither can anybody else that's looked at it. So that in itself, I said, is, I would say, peer review.
And you know it's not important what things look like. It's very important in this case what things really are, right? I mean, it's what things really are, what this jury is going to be basing their decision on. It has to be based on things that are repeatable and provable and scientifically based. Would you agree with that?
Well, although it hasn't been peer reviewed out of this courtroom, I think at the two levels I just said, my own peer review and the fact that independent of me, somebody else produced the same product, that's as good as it gets. If it only comes in through the defense, that doesn't bother me because they'll see what they need to see.
And that's the goal in this, right?
For the jury to see what they need as accurate as possible, yes, sir, absolutely.
Have you been qualified as an expert in state court before?
In what fields? I mean, yes, I have.
But never in anything having to do with forensic video stabilization and enhancement or forensic scene analysis and recreation, correct?
No, in the other cases I cited, it didn't reach that point where the other side challenged the work. They adopted the work, so I was never put through the process. But no, I have not.
And how about in federal court for the same thing?
Same thing, I have not.
Thing? And have you ever been disqualified as an expert witness?
In the field of forensic or in any field?
In any field.
At what level?
At federal court level.
Well, like in this process right here, or previous to getting to court, or afterwards?
As you offered testimony that you felt was going to be expert testimony or it was offered on your behalf, have you ever been disqualified?
In a case with Mr. Bell out of Georgetown, an environmental case, I don't know the details, I haven't read the order, but after deposition, there was a motion filed to basically disqualify, and it was agreed upon. That's that one, okay?
And do you know what the basis for your exclusion was?
Yes, that it had the background to do what I was doing. I had told Mr. Bell in front of witnesses that I did not want to do what he was doing to me. I did not sign up for that. I let a lawyer do something to me I shouldn't have let him do. And it turned out bad, more bad for me than anybody else.
And if the root core was because you didn't have the training, the court decided you didn't have the training, knowledge, and experience to offer the opinion you were asked to offer, isn't that correct?
Well, it's entirely different than this case. And unless you know the whole story, you can't make the comparison.
I'm not trying to make a comparison at all, I'm just
Okay.
asking the reasons behind that, because this court has to make a decision as a gatekeeper, whether you have the knowledge, training, experience to offer the opinions that you're going to offer, correct?
Right, and the key word in that last one is experience. In this other case, I do a lot of background work for Mr. Bell. He was an environmental case against IP Paper, and he had an expert that was an air modeling expert. When IP finally turned over all the data, the expert said, it's too much. So I basically ran the models for him, and he was supposed to adopt that work as his own, and I'd never see the light of day. But when he saw the volume of work I produced, he panicked and said, I can't do it. So Mr. Bell threw me to the wolves. Now, in that case, I produced training videos for a number of different companies, and I've been working with video software and capturing video and all the aspects up until and through today. So there's a difference there.
Well, but you still didn't have the training in this, you're not a member of the, of LEVA, are you?
No, I'm not.
And not a member of IAI?
I am not, sir.
You've never taught on this subject?
No, sir.
You've never given a seminar on this subject?
I have not.
You've not attended any continuing educations in this subject?
I have not.
Watson v. Brown? Are you
Yes.
familiar with that opinion?
I am. That's why I asked you at what level.
Yeah, and that was a case where your testimony was permitted in, but later ruled it should not have been permitted in, is that correct?
That's what eventually happened, yes, sir.
And that was in the Supreme Court, South Carolina?
It was, but again, there's a background story, if you'd like to hear it.
Sure.
I was asked to do one thing in that case, and that is to teach the jury how a speed control system worked in a '95 Ford Explorer. Just to teach them how it worked. Now, for no opinions on defect or anything else, just make sure the jury had the foundation to know that how that speed system worked when the next expert got up and started talking about what happens to it, what goes wrong. The case is actually on Court TV. The Court TV was there the whole time, so I have a CD or DVD of it. And I was up on for a day and a half teaching the jury. I built a working speed control system, brought into the courtroom. I had 3D animations built of the parts to show them the internals and stuff. I had the jury answering questions, basically, even though it's not allowed. It was a classroom. So I got my job done, and then this happened. So I'm still baffled about how that occurred, but it's outside my control.
But you understand the court's reluctance when even those with experience don't have documented training or belong to organizations or have gotten some sort of sense of the fact that they are in that community of people who are offering these expert opinions.
Well, whether that was one of the mistakes that was made about designating as an expert, I was really a fact witness because all I did was teach them how a system worked in the car. I'm not a lawyer. That end of things I don't get into. I don't understand. I understand what you're talking about, but I also understand that I've been doing this for a lot of years, and on a speed control system, all my work and all the other systems in the car set me a foundation to allow me to do what I did. It's the same as when I go to inspection with these other engineers, and they've never seen the car or part they're looking at, but they have the engineering background to be able to look at something new and deal with it. It's the same principle. I have a foundation, so.
You heard Mr. Emmel testify earlier,
I did.
and he has a pedigree in this sort of work, correct?
Yes, he does.
And you would agree that it would be important to have someone testifying for the jury that has a qualification that is objective and not subjective for this court to make its gatekeeping decision.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Wouldn't you agree that for the court to make its gatekeeping decision on the reliability of the data that you are providing in the form of an opinion, that it's best to have an objective view that can be demonstrated in training, organizations, continuing education in these programs to give a sense of confidence that you meet the scientific foundations that's required to take a murder case to a jury?
Well, I'm offering no opinions about the videos other than they're accurate. But in general, I'd agree, other than you keep leaving out the experience aspect of things.
One moment, Judge. Okay, so you're not going to offer any opinions in this case?
Other than my work's accurate, I'm not going to say this came out of this hand, or this went that, or this, no.
Well, if you calculate a measurement, would that be an opinion?
I stand corrected on that, yes, sir.
So if what you intend on doing is based on some of the work you've done is give the jury hard numbers based on the work you've done, those are your opinions.
Well, I was focusing on the video aspect of things. That's what we've been talking about here. So as far as the video, no opinion on that. But yes, on that other work, sure. I'm just going to say this is the results of my work, plus or minus, accept it or not, just like everybody else.
But it is important for the jury to have accurate videos of you as well, right? Even without an opinion offered.
Oh, sure. I agree wholeheartedly.
So, no opinions on the video.
As far as what Mr. Savage was asking, no. As far as which way his eye's going, which is that now, if he wants, I've spent time on the mechanical aspect of things, that is like the taser.
Or wanted to document the case.
Well, I certainly have my own opinions about certain things, but they're not going to be offered to the jury. I mean, I know this case maybe not as good as you guys, but I've spent 500 plus hours on this. So, yeah, in some role I've been an investigator, but that's not my primary role. That's not why I'm sitting in front of the jury, no.
Your job is not to turn up new facts necessarily, but to take the information that's been given to you and furnish it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you do any independent measurements of your own, any independent analysis of the scene on your own?
I've been to the scene 3 times. I mean, yes.
And when you visited the scene, did you take equipment to measure and verify and all those sorts of things?
Did I do a survey of the scene? No, I did not.
And have you been trained in any crime scene analysis or crime scene forensics at all?
Same answer. I don't have formal training.
And you're being offered as an expert in the field of, let me make sure I have this straight, the video Video stabilization and forensic scene analysis, correct?
Yes, sir.
But you're not going to give opinions on either of those?
Other than you corrected me and say that my work results in X distance from here to here, that's it.
But you would agree that that is an opinion?
I do agree that's an opinion. It's a reporting of my work. I mean, it's, however you want to term it, yes. It's the results of my work.
Did you have a chance to look at the Faro data in this case? Do you know what Faro data is?
Yes, I don't own a Faro machine, but I deal with Faro data in other cases, and yes, I have looked at this Faro data.
Did you use the Faro data in any of your work analysis calculations?
No, we looked at it early on and decided on a different course.
And why is that?
Well, if you go back to what I was originally asked to do, A, create a timeline, so it really has nothing to do with that.
Right.
Okay? B, try and determine the distance between Mr. Scott and Mr. Slager. It could have application there, but all I was asked to do was a distance approximate that, and there's other ways to go about it that I deemed were, whether you want to call it simpler and or more effective, I went a different route. There's more than one way to skin a cat. So I went that direction. We also, based on, in recreating the scene, we realized early on that there was an issue with the evidence markers. So that's another reason we discounted the Faro, because they were not accurate to the scene. So really all you get from the Faro is a nice three-dimensional ability to look around the scene. Other than that, we didn't see any benefit.
But you didn't reject Faro data, you just went a different way.
Well, we rejected it in using for, I can pull an electronic tape measure in Faro, right, from the telephone poles that the sled used. When we did that, we said it doesn't match. It didn't even match the crime scene diagram. Then when we started working the scene, the crime scene diagram didn't even match the actual placement of the object.
So now you understand what we've been dealing with over the past 18 months.
Yes, sir. Now, on the plus side, and I mean, we'll get to it later on, but they took some really nice photos that allowed us to do the proper placement of the placards for each of the things, but it was CSI 101. We're on our hands and knees matching up rocks. So you can have technology through the roof, but that technology wouldn't help me place that marker where it really was when that photograph was taken. What was us identifying the fact that they weren't right, the Faro wasn't right, the photos or the crime scene diagram wasn't right. We found that what was right, and that is, here's that rock, and we literally spent a day on our knees putting them back where they belong. So we chose to go outside of Faro. There's other reasons why. In Faro, you don't have Mr. Scott or Mr. Slager, do you? No, all you have is the scene. You don't have the evidence markers, although they're there, they're not accurate. So now what you have to do, if you're going to use that to determine what I was asked to do, and that is positions between person one and person two, is now you have to match that to the video. And we saw that would be problematic, so, and maybe more time consuming, maybe not after looking at all the hours I've spent there, but either way, we decided no. We went this way.
Are you going to offer opinions then in photogrammetry?
Well, I'm going to offer that my work was valid and that it's accurate.
And you have training in photogrammetry?
No, sir.
Any courses in photogrammetry?
No, sir.
Any continuing education in photogrammetry?
No, sir.
Can you explain what photogrammetry is?
Yeah, it's basically extrapolating measurements from a 2D picture. We're using a specific type of a reverse projection photogrammetry. We're basically doing a physical camera match on the scene to accomplish the same goals. There's all different levels and types of photogrammetry. We use that subspecies of that type.
So that would be a manual type photogrammetry?
Yes, sir.
And what do you use for that scene in the manual photogrammetry to make sure that you are getting accurate measurements?
Well, the process, I obtained an exemplar phone that matched the Santana phone, and then I basically chose the frame from each of the shots, 1 through 7. You can't do 8 because the camera moves and it's not, you couldn't do it unless you did it separately. So I chose the frames, especially frame 1 because that's the key frame. I created a transparency of that shot with the fixed objects, and that is telephone poles, tree, the line of the road, the fence line. And then at the scene, I first built this rather bulky and a camera holder, something that would allow me to precisely move the camera in most of the axes, not all. I had some non-controllable. My original was going to put that, and that was going to allow me to control this camera. I piped that signal out to a monitor with the transparency on it, so I could see how close I was to my target. And I kept adjusting and adjusting, capture, adjust, capture, adjust, capture, until I got a match which satisfied my visual quality control. And I did that 3 times, 3 different visits, 3 start from scratch processes that yielded very consistent results.
And you did an animation as well?
Not of that.
Of the scene?
Well, the animation is, there's a certain portion, of course, of the incident that's not captured on Santana's video. So we filled the blank from the parking lot to when you go off camera. Mr. Scott, you never see Mr. Slager on camera, but Mr. Scott goes off camera. So we filled the blank from there to when the Santana video with not the people's motion isn't supposed to represent what their actual gait was or their arms moving or anything, but the pace was representative of what would take place, and that was established by looking at the evidence and the times between the evidence and animating it to match that. So, yeah, we created that animation.
And you said it's just to match the pace. You just took the time and divided it by distance and placed people at spots along the way?
That was a primary driving factor. We know that at scene marker 1 and 2 that there was a taser fired, and we know that one dart did strike Mr. Scott, so he had to be within 25 feet, so we used that as a guideline. We knew they were closer, they were close enough for both barbs at taser 2, so we used those parameters to fit into that average into the speed and distance too.
But it would not be like an automotive recreation you might do where you could drive in a car at the same speed and actually duplicate the position along the way with any great accuracy.
No, I'd say that it certainly is representative of what took place. Nobody will ever know exactly what took place because there's not video.
Right.
But the timing, if you look at the end product where all the layers have been synced, it certainly makes good sense. The things fell into place. You can actually, when taser 1 goes off, you can hear taser 1 going off where I have it placed. I mean, so it proves itself out by looking at the other aspects, other medias. At least to me it does.
And just to be clear, how many, Mr. Scott was hit by 1 prong of a taser, you said, or you said
Well,
one prong?
For the first tasing, 1. Second tasing, again, I'm not in front of a jury.
I'm not asking for that.
Okay.
I'm asking how you have recreated this, because it's not realistic, meaning it is an animation, and it's an estimation, and it's approximation,
I agree.
Up to certain points where you have hard data, and you just filled in those blanks.
I agree, but and I'm not going to be offering those unless I'm asked to the jury as far as my conclusions on the tasers. Obviously, the cartridge from the first tasing ended up downstream. So it was attached to somebody, okay? One of the darts was left behind. And then we know that the second cartridge ended up near Mr. Scott. And that, at least the statements that I've read, he reacted to the second tasing. So, but again, what I'm asked, that's just my conclusions.
Thank you, Mr. Wood.
Yes, sir.
Back to the,
We're gonna break for lunch now for 45 minutes. So we'll be in recess for 45 minutes. They should be available. It doesn't seem likely we'll get to them, the way this is going. So, I don't know. I have no clue.
2 o'clock.
Yeah, we'll break till 2. And you can take a break.
Thank you.
Please do
Your
not
Honor.
discuss your testimony.